Shalom Aleichem. Let's learn a Sikha. Recording this just a few hours before Yom Kippur, and it has a very powerful lesson. Bashkach HaPratis, we're learning Pikudei, which talks about the Beis Hamikdash, and takes us back to a parsha that we learned months ago. And it goes on the first Rashi, or the second Rashi actually in the parsha. Eila Pikudei HaMishkan, Mishkan Edus, that's the first pasuk in the parsha, and Rashi says, why Eila Pikudei HaMishkan, Mishkan Edus, why the word Mishkan twice? Remez LeMikdash, Shnis Mashkin B'Shtei Churbanim, Alvinisem Yisrael. It says twice to hint to the Mikdash, the single Mikdash, which was Nismashkin, was given as a collateral to the Jewish people, like a mashkain, and through Churbanis, Alavinisem Yisrael, on the sins of the Jewish people. And this is like Rashi that the Rebbe literally, figuratively rather, rips apart to try to understand. Like, first of all, we understand why you're referencing the Beis Hamikdash. Mishkan to reference the Two Batei Mikdashos. But why are we referencing the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Also, why are we using the Mishkan and the word as the word mashkain? Why don't you just say Mishkan? Mishkan references is a hint to the Two Batei Mikdashos. What mashkain? It's collateral. I borrowed from you, and I'm giving you this to hold until I pay you back. And many other, like, why does Rashi have to say Mishkan, Shtei Pa'amim twice? Obviously, that's why he's asking why it says twice. Why does he have to point out? Did you notice? It says it twice. And why do you have to talk about the destruction? And why do you have to mention that the destruction was on the sins of the Am Yisrael? And why are you saying it on the Two Batei Mikdashos and you're not saying it on the Mishkan Shiloi, the Mishkan that was in the desert, etc.? And seemingly, the Mishkan Shiloi and the Beis Hamikdash, the first one, have more in common than the Two Batei Mikdashos. Why? Because we know in the second Beis Hamikdash there were things lacking. Fundamentally, the Aron HaKodesh. On the other hand, both in Mishkan Shiloi and in Beis Rishon, they had the Aron HaKodesh. So if you're choosing two, choose two that have a stronger similarity. And that's where the Rebbe really starts in the answer. And he says, no, they're not similar. Because fundamentally, the two Batei Mikdash had something which the Mishkan didn't have, and it was a stable home. It wasn't a temporary structure that you could just unpack in a few hours. It was built of stone, and it was solid in the ground. It's not a diras arai, it's a diras keva. It's not a temporary dwelling, it's a permanent dwelling. And that nekuda, the Rebbe says, even a child could understand, that you explained that the Two Batei Mikdashos, yes, the second Beis Hamikdash was lacking, but it had the same principle. It was established a home. It wasn't a tent in the desert or in the Shiloh. So because they were both a bayis elamim, Hashem says, Beis Elikim, there's many references in the Psukim for a bayis. So therefore they have in common, and therefore when it says Mishkan, we reference the Two Batei Mikdashos who have more in common rather than the Mishkan and the first Beis Hamikdash. Now, the Rebbe says more. From the fact that it uses the word Mishkan, and it's the same word twice, means that it has to be something which is very similar. And that's why the Rashi says, Shtei Pa'amim. In other words, his point is not, oh, did you notice it says two times? No. Did you notice that it's the same word said two times? And that means that the word Mishkan, Mashkan, is two things which are very, very similar. And what's that? The Beis Hamikdash. Now, we can understand why the Beis Hamikdash is called a Mashkan. Because what does Mashkin tell us? It gives us an incredible insight. If Hashem says, I gave you the mashkin and I took it back. In other words, even when Hashem takes it back, it's still 100% there. It's just not by you. I gave it to you, and now I took it back, but it's still there. In other words, the lack is only on your part, on Am Yisrael's part. It's not on behalf of the Eibishter, and it's not on behalf of the Beis Hamikdash. And that's why he says, Avinisem Shel Yisrael. It's the sins of Am Yisrael that created the distance. It's only Yachasit, it's only relative to the Jewish people a problem. But compared to the Eibishter and compared to the Beis Hamikdash itself, it's absolutely there. And that's another reason that in the words of an essentially soul, there's another hint why it's Dafka the Beis Hamikdash and not the Mishkan, because the Mishkan wasn't destroyed for those of an essential Yisrael. It was just for a few people, the children of Eli, Chafni, and Pinchas, as it says in Shmuel Aleph. Now, as we said, of an essential Yisrael, it's only Mitzad Am Yisrael that the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, but Mitzad Hashem, it's totally there. Hashem wants it to be a Beis Hamikdash. And he says more than that. If you look at it, you'll see for hundreds of years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Avon Essential Yisrael was very, very strong. In Bayis Rishon, it was Avodah Zarah, and Bayis Sheni, it was the Yidden leaving Yiddishkeit, and the Sinas Chinam, and the Tzdukim, and all the other nonsense that went on. And nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu waited a tremendous amount of time and only destroyed Bayis Rishon after 410 years, and Bayis Sheni after 420 years. And that is coming to incredible Chiddush. That even though the Beis Hamikdash was never destroyed on behalf of the Eibishter, and even though it was only destroyed only for the sins of Am Yisrael, even then HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't rush to do it. And here's a mind-blowing Haydah, which makes this Sikha so appropriate for Yom Kippur. Just mind-blowing. Haydah in Avodas Adam never says in Zayin is Dayil Le'evet Sheyeh Kerabai, a servant should be just like their master. Just like Hashem held back from destroying the Beis Hamikdash for a tremendous amount of time, even though the reason of the Churban, Avnei and Shal Yisrael, the sins were there, Hashem gave them strength to do tshuva. And so too, we have to forgive, we have to be able to give other Yidden graciousness, to allow them to do tshuva, not to hold back anything. Don't hold them back from giving them Torah mitzvahs, giving them a lulav, giving them an esrei, giving them, a shefer blowing. They're not perfect Jews. No, they have to be a mishkan b'shachanti b'seicham. And b'seich kol echad v'echad, the Rebbe references over there, the famous Veishis Chachma and the Shalah, b'seichai lo nemer, doesn't say b'shachanti b'seichai in it, but rather b'seicham, b'seich kol echad v'echad in each and every one of us. Even if that person's imperfect. Adarabah. You have an obligation to admonish them, obviously, with words of love, and love them. It says to them even more. You have a proof from what the Eibishter did that you don't focus on what they're doing wrong. In Parshas Kisisa, it says that Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu the first luchos. The Rebbe does an insight. I never saw this before. Mind-blowing. When did the Eibishter give Moshe Rabbeinu the luchos? On the 40th day in the morning. The day before already, Am Yisrael already decided to make the egel, and all they did is they made the whole deal with Aaron. They said, Chag L'Hashem Machar. We're going to make the party tomorrow on the 40th day, which was that time of the day that Moshe would have come down. So by the time HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving Moshe Rabbeinu the luchos, the Yidden are already pretty much full-on rebellion. And they made the egel. And nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu so that he could teach it to Am Yisrael. And then he gives him the luchos, even though they did the egel at the time. Mind-blowing. Alachas kama v'kama, how much more so? That's the way you have to be with another Yid. Don't hold back from giving them Torah mitzvahs. Don't look at their level of nuchnius. On the contrary, give them, and that's going to accomplish that they will be able to upgrade, because we know Meir ein ishneim avaya. When we help another Yid with their Yiddishkeit, it enlightens both our eyes. And the Rebbe references over here from the Torah, the famous Torah that says, Nase meichei v'liboy zachim elvam kacha, that when you do, when you bring Yiddishkeit to another Yid, it makes your mind and your heart pure 1,000 times. And then he quotes from Eira Torah, from the Tzemach Tzedek, who says that that's not exaggeration. Loi b'derech guzma. It's literal, 1,000 times. So go help another Yid, and through that, we are zeicha to give the Beis Hamikdash b'mkoimei. It should be taken from Yad Mamish, a good gebench to each and every one of us.